Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to the webinar, the Organizational Design Community webinar. I'm Rich Burton. I'm Professor Emeritus at Duke University, and I'm joined by my colleague Børge Obel, who's Professor at the University of Aarhus. And if you want to know more about us, you can Google us and find out more details. Our discussion today is both built on theory and with practical examples on the question of diverse effects of digitalization AI on organizational design. The work is, as I mentioned, is built around a book that is co-authored with Dorte Håkansson at the University of Aarhus. And that book is now in its 4th edition and is available next summer in 2020 from Cambridge University Press. Earlier editions are available from Cambridge and booksellers. Let me say a little bit about what we mean by divergent effects.
Would you maybe say that if there are questions, they should use the chat box?
Yes. Let me back up for just a second. If you have questions as we go along, please write them in the chat box, and Børge and I will be able to look at them at the end, and at that time we will discuss them with you. Our initial comments here, we're trying to target for about 30 minutes, and that'll give us time to look at your questions at that time. Our theme today is on the diverse effects of the digital. Can we run the slides the other direction?
Yes.
Okay, diverse effects of AI. And one of them has to do with, shall we say, self-organizations and bossless, or that's an organization without a boss. And then the question in that, and what we're seeing is that AI and digitalization may reduce the need for hierarchy in the organization. And of course, this brings up the question of what do you substitute for hierarchy, and we'll talk about that some more. In contrast, the AI and digitalization can create situations for more bureaucratic organizations, bureaucracy in the classic sense. And in that is it goes in a bit of the opposite direction or in contrast. And even there, we can think about the IA and digitalization as perhaps as being bosses in the organization. And they play the role, shall we say, of managers in the perfect bureaucracy. Now, this is hopefully provocative and a bit controversial. And so we'd be interested in what your comments might be and questions might be about that. But this is the main theme, and we'll try to develop that over the next few minutes. So in terms of trends, just to repeat a little bit, there are new organizational forms and self-organizing. There's a lot more interest now in the relationship between the top of the organization and the bottom of the organization with respect to strategy and structure, and then job design and so on. And as we just mentioned, there's also a notion on one side how to get rid of bureaucracies and hierarchy with the self-organization. And as we suggested, there may be a trend in the other direction of introducing more bureaucracy, perhaps less hierarchy in the organization. And underlying this, of course, is a goal of being more efficient and also creating an organization that is more innovative. So how did anybody who has looks at organizations has a view how do we look at the organization and make sense out of it? Our particular paradigm is based on an information-driven system, and in that, we look at the system and design as determining, shall we say, some very basic notions of who talks to whom about what, who does what to achieve the coordination, and who makes what decisions. So the big issue is in terms of that is that design and structure permit us to achieve coordination, and these are really fundamental in deciding what is going to be the information flow or the information system in the organization. We take these as fundamental choices and processes in organization design. And in that is that our model, I show on the left-hand side, but under that, there's a need, creates a need for organizational processing. And looking on that, the goal, the strategy, the environment, the leadership, climate, and task, they create the need for information processing. And on the other side, you have the capability to process information, and that's a configuration, formalization or rules, decision-making or under decentralization decision-making, how people are going to be rewarded, and adding in a somewhat non-traditional, very fundamental is the role of the information systems in the organization. And these must fit together. And one of these is that you cannot, shall we say, just adjust one without considering the total of the system. This is the fit criteria that we use in our particular view. So I'm going to turn it over to Børge at this point and to talk about exponential, digital, and combinatorial and other things. And I'll come back a little bit later to talk about a particular example.
The fit model that we just saw in the previous slide has the environment as one of the issues that is driving the way we design organizations. And what we talk about in the digital area is that it changes the environment we are working in and also the task and other things that happen in an organization. In the digital area, we talk about that things are happening more quickly, fast. Things have changed the cost, particularly transportation of information and other things. We see the complexity goes up. And we also see that companies are changing the way they do business, moving from product to service. And basically, the idea has been that all these changes with a very fast and technological development creates an environment with a high environmental uncertainty. And Galbraith's information processing model that we are using basically say that if you have a high environmental uncertainty, the demand for information processing goes up, and you have to have an organization that can provide a lot of information processing and also to react to fast changes in the environment. But we also see that there's a focus both on efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency has been the target for digitalization in many years. And now we see many new trends with respect to changing the way we actually do business. If we have these changes and in the environment, it often means that we need radical innovation. And here's we have seen a number of experiments with creating what we call new organizational forms. And basically, the fundamental part of creating a new organizational form is on the principle of self-organizing. It is also even self-selection, and that requires new type of employees that can self-organize and maybe even self-select. You also see that the digitalization with many new technologies allow for virtual organization, so the people in this self-organizing organization may not even be present at the same time. They may work from home, they may work in different time zones, etc. This is a structure But as Rich said, the fundamental of organizational design is structure and coordination, and therefore we have to find new ways to coordinate. IT and platform system play an important role. Some of the changes, some of the challenges we'll discuss a little further on is that connectedness is now also bringing new challenges to the coordination. Let's give some examples from three different types of companies, two particular and one more general. We see in looking at digitalized organization, we see traditional companies that go through digital transformation, and we see organizations that are born digital. Hire is an example of a traditional organization that over some years had used digitalization also to create new organizational form. Hire has been much researched with its new and innovative organizational setup with thousands of micro enterprises that are self-organized to some degree, also create themselves, can shut themselves down. They are coordinated using platform coordination, and they have a very particular incentive system where incentives are based on performance, and they even require that leaders of the micro enterprises, if they do new things, invest themselves in the activity. So Hire has been very successful in creating innovation in traditional industries using this micro enterprise setup. One of the challenges that Hire may experience in the future is their announcement in March that they now will enter the smart home industry and have a smart home strategy. It's suddenly because of the way digitalization works now and connect various devices, use the Internet of Things, create coordination requirements across all these micro enterprises. It's going to be interesting to see how the new organization form that was developed by Hire will work in this new setup. Companies that are born digital start from a different perspective and move maybe in another direction. And one example is GitHub. And Rich will talk a little bit about GitHub.
Thanks, Børge. GitHub is sometimes referred to as a poster child bossless organization. A good deal has been written on that. And part of what I'm going to say here is also in the Journal of Organization Design 2017. The Journal of Organization Design is the journal of the organizational design community. It's an open access journal, and you can just Google it and go there and find more about GitHub by searching on GitHub. GitHub was a San Francisco, California software company formed in 2007. It quickly had 300 and then on to 600 employees, and was quite unusual in terms of the way that it was put together as a bossless organization. And one of the big ways that you can think about that is they delegated the choice of projects to workers, not to a hierarchy or to the bosses. Now, GitHub provides a platform. It's a single product, and they're trying to connect IT developers. So the projects then were building on this platform to make to give more functionality for the developers. So let me talk a little bit about how it was initially. There was no hierarchy, no middle managers, no project managers, and one of the big goals was to make employees happy. They had an informal hiring approach in which they looked for others in the organization, looked for people like themselves who fit in, and they had no HR in the organization. Mostly it was run by informal teams, and the rule of two was a very powerful rule in order to create coordination in the organization. And it worked the following way, that no one could be a freelancer, that is to say, go off and do things on their own. There had to be in the in the project at least 2 people. So individuals had to sell their ideas to a small group in order to move ahead. It seems like it is a simple rule, but it worked very powerfully to create coordination, climate, even to, shall we say, create an atmosphere in which happiness could develop. Then in 2014, they turned everything upside down. I should say in 27, there was also a CEO and there was a top of the organization who intervened very rarely into issues that had to come up. Even issues of conflict were dealt with by consensus within the organization. In 2014, 7 years later, there's the introduction of explicit coordination roles, VPs, HR function, project managers, official reviews, project choice by committee, and introduction of, shall we say, a managerial hierarchy. So this all begs a question in terms of the bossless organization. Is hierarchy necessary? Well, the rule of 2 was very powerful as a substitute, we would argue, but it really wasn't sufficient. The climate that they had was, they developed is very important. Issues of informal hiring were also rules outside the hierarchy. But we would suggest to you that this is probably more of an issue of emphasis rather than absolute. And what we mean by that is that it's not clear that you can, over a long period of time, particularly for a larger organization, operate without a hierarchy. Maybe that's controversial, maybe it is not. We will see. So moving on with GitHub now has recently been sold to Microsoft, and at this point we don't know exactly how it's been integrated into Microsoft. But the original 2 was without a hierarchy, without a bossless organization, and then a flip almost to a fairly formal hierarchical organization with somewhat the usual functions. So Børge will take you back and talk a little bit about the blockchain and other issues there.
Digitalization is many things, and we see new technologies that evolve. We'll talk a little bit later on the effect of artificial intelligence on organizational design. But before we do that, I'll just mention quickly the blockchain. Blockchain is technology that a lot of people are discussing. How will that affect the way we do things? And one of the results people claim is that there will be decentralized autonomous organization and replace a number of organizations we have today. The ability by blockchain to provide secure, truthful information exchange could, from that perspective, enable organization where a lot of the middle part of the organization disappear, and maybe the organization as such completely disappear, except for the sort of setup of the organization. There will be a number of papers in the Academy of Management journals that discuss this, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that is moving on. We talked about bossless organization or self-organizing, and how these new organizational forms have tried to be designs that can handle the fast and uncertain world that we live in. But we'll try to take a completely different perspective by looking at what artificial intelligence also may do to the way we organize. If we look at the way many organizations are starting to work, is that they're using artificial intelligence and prediction algorithm to get a much better picture of what's going on in the environment. You can predict what's happening to your customers. You may get profiles. You may be able to predict what your suppliers are doing. So in that sense, you can reduce the uncertainty in the environment. Some even claim that Google can anticipate what you will type into your search box before you do it. by combining information from a lot of devices and a lot of different sources. So by knowing much more about environment and sometimes also manipulating the way you actually interact, artificial intelligence and prediction algorithms may reduce the uncertainty in the environment. That means that you know in advance what will happen and you can plan that way. And if you go to the information processing paradigm, you'll get some information about how that will work. We see that in many industries. We've seen that in retail in particular, but we also see that in banking a lot. We'll also come back to that in a little. So what does the theory about organizational design say about how to organize in a certain environment? It basically says that you could have a high degree of formalization, you can use rule-based decision or rule-based actions, you can have a high degree of specialization, and normally a functional organization. If you look at that, it sort of gives you the idea that what we're talking about is actually a bureaucracy. And so maybe a bureaucracy will be a good design when the environment is uncertain. It means that we have a formal hierarchy, authority, we have management by rules, division of labor, achievement-based advancement, efficient operation, and personal environment. And that was maybe exactly what digitalization and the new organization forms really wanted to avoid, but will artificial intelligence and other digital algorithms and technologies bring it back in a new way. So in a bureaucracy, many, if not most tasks could be done by artificial intelligent robots. So we may even take this idea about the bureaucracy to a new bureaucracy. And if you have artificial intelligent robots to be the agents in the organization, then maybe some of the issues that we have had with the bureaucracy will disappear. Limited information processing capacity, complex hierarchy, bounded rationality, and personal self-interest may disappear. Some may argue that personal self-interest could also be present in artificial intelligent robots because they do what they are trained to do. And in that sense, they can be trained to have a particular view. And we have had discussion about the decision made by artificial intelligent robots were biased one way or the other. You could even take it further. If you go back to the paper in Harvard Business Review by Vegard Kolbjørnsrud and his colleagues, they actually argue that not only in bureaucracies, but more generally, management does a lot of things that can be described by following rules. And in that sense, these activities could be done by robots. And in a bureaucracy, quite a few of the activities and decisions are based on rules. So in that sense, you could also think that in a bureaucracy, not only the quite a few, and even some of the managers would be AI robots. And that could fit very well. And that could even have further issues about tenure payment, social status, and bounded rationality to disappear. So in a new AI-based bureaucracy, many tasks and decisions can be routinized. With certain environment, tasks can be changed from judgment tasks to transaction tasks. Transformation, transaction, judgment tasks could be carried out by AI robots. And that actually means that what we also see right now, that many white-collar tasks will be moved from humans to AI agents. Middle manager's job will be taken over by AI agents, and human will occupy jobs that focus on creative and social tasks with some judgment tasks. This means that there may not be fewer jobs, but they will definitely be different. And in some cases, there may also be fewer. An interesting thing here is that a significant part of the interaction with customers and suppliers could be done by agents. And that means we have to think about how organization and here AI bureaucracies, that how's the interaction between AI robots and humans. There will be a new also area for research, because we'll see AI robots interact with customers. We see that in many cases already. And we're also now seeing AI robots interacting with employees. Recruiting companies are starting to screen and communicate with applicants using AI robots. In the new book about Uber, middle management is explained to be done by AI robots, and many of the drivers may not even know that they are dealing with an AI robot. We see many regulated industries, for example, banks, are changing a lot of the activities to be done by AI robots instead of banks. Many customer advisors have been replaced by chatbots. We see big banks like Citibank and many banks in Denmark that announce that they sack a significant number of people to replace them with artificial intelligent robots. In service industries, the communication is very often with AI robots, and in many cases you may not even know that you are dealing with an AI robot. In a whole industry like smart home industry, the communication is now more and more relying on using data and artificial intelligence, and in the whole service setup, this is going to be, I think, the future in many, many cases. So to conclude this different view on designing organizations, digitalization will often require and support, or the support of new organizational forms, but AI and digitalization may also revitalize the bureaucracy. AI robots will be the primary contact with the environment, reducing task environmental uncertainty, be more rule-based, more formalization with respect to operation and service, and many bureaucracy will even include management with AI robots. There will of course be side effects on job design, skill requirements, incentives, and more. You may think it is a choice between a new organizational form and a bureaucracy. What we see in many organizations, that in parts of the organization, a new organizational form is necessary. And in other parts of the organization, you are running it like a new bureaucracy. We talked about that now the digitalization is requiring both efficiency and effectiveness. And in the efficiency, you run it like a robot. And in the effectiveness part, you will have new organizational forms. So it will be either or, it will probably for many organizations be both. We also saw both in Hire and in GitHub that there's an evolution, and they are changing as companies get into new situation and they grow. We have in the presentation that you can find on the website afterwards, and we hope you enjoyed what we said, and we look forward to look at your questions and discuss. Okay. So here's it. If the environment is uncertain, needing to change formalization, what kind of AI organizational structure? What we see now also is that there are what you call the traditional kind of AI that is more rule-based. And that is probably not the one that will be needed in an uncertain environment. We see that AI also can create its own rules and also be part of anticipating and adjusting. There's a big discussion about whether artificial intelligence can deal with creative activities. There's research going on, and I participated in a discussion or talk presentation the other day, and here the view was that when we have quantum computing, AI robots may eventually be as intelligent as a human being, and something like 2045 is a target for that. We'll see whether that's happening, and it's going to be, I think, a lot of discussion whether that's going to be the case.
One of the partway down, there's a comment that says recruitment is a good area to explore the impact of robot-based recruitment. It's dehumanizing for people, especially for those just out of the university looking for their first job, and very disappointing from a psychological and social impact. I would not disagree with that. I think any time that you put the machines in, there's always a issue of whether the social impact is desirable or not. We've had this over time now with this, but if you think about back with email, the same question came up, and I'm old enough to remember when my grandparents wouldn't talk on the telephone because it's dehumanizing. They had to talk face to face. So all of these, and I think that this is a two-way issue that perhaps younger people may well say that it's fine to do this. In fact, some of us are worried that we're introducing too many of these chats and other ways of communicating that are indeed dehumanizing. But your point is well taken. It is disappointing in some sense. But it is not a static thing. It will develop over time.
There's also a question about if blockchain increases data availability to many more people in the organization, then coordination requires higher centralization. Does a degree of mutual interdependence increase? Well, blockchain is an interesting new technology, and it has also been linked very much to what you call smart contracts. And it creates more trustful and secure communication. But the interesting thing is that a smart contract cannot be changed. So in that sense, it creates some benefits, but it also creates other issues. And so I would say, if you look at some of the blockchain activities, it is rather rigid and cannot be changed. And I don't know how that's going to work. And that brings us also to a question that says that most of our clients are disappointed with digitalization due to the fact that human factor engagement leads towards self-organized and avoiding resistance, while technology is currently static and rigid and does not adapt easily to human factors. So what are your thoughts about when AI will catch up with other and blend into human factors? This is an interesting question. We have artificial intelligence is actually developing, I would say, rapidly these days, and we're also now seeing in a completely different setup the development of social robots, where actually robots are created to have relationship and be able to relate to people. We also see in many cases also in the organization that we actually do not know whether it's a robot or not that's doing that. And it can adapt to some of the human factors. In an organization, we are talking about onboarding. If we bring if we bring a human person into the organization, what is the big thing here is training of artificial intelligent robots. And artificial intelligent robots, and what they do will in many cases, most cases, be based on the type of information that is used to train them. And that's also a discussion that's going on right now.
Moving on down, there's a comment from Nick Richmond, and he says it sounds like to ensure AI rules are continuously updated, new rules will be required to review the changes and continue to develop the AI or intelligent robots in the organization. I think this is quite right. We have two thoughts on this. First of all, the AI, the systems we have now deal very well with transactions, and these transactions, as you say, may or may not work as the environment changes. The other side of it is they may create a certain environment, as Børge argued before. But there's going to have to be a whole group of people who, at this point, who do the updating of the algorithms and the rules in the organization, both to improve them, but also to make adjustments. And we see that there's a lot of employment there at this point in time. Will that be further, shall we say, with machine learning and so on, be less important? I don't know at this time, but it seems like, at least in the short run and perhaps even the longer run, the innovation tasks, the creativity tasks, they're still going to be there, and we see no reason in the short run that is going to change. Let me give you just a quick analog for, I think this question suggests that for many years we've thought about that there are machines that run production units, where automatic machines, et cetera, and do they need maintenance? Of course they need maintenance. Do they need upgrading? Of course. So in some sense, this is a rough analog between that and these kinds of information systems.
You can also think there's a question about how to AI relate to uncertainty and changeability. If you go back to the use of robots and automation, for example, in the car industry. So in the old days, you had assembly lines and you could basically only produce one type of car. And so as you said, the Ford T you could get in all kinds of colors as long as you would choose black. And if you look at the assembly line today with production robots, you can actually tailor-make the car to fit the particular need of the customer, and still in an assembly line setup. Will we see that in management and administrative jobs as well, where the AI can adapt much more easily because it has many more rules, it can update the rules more quickly? We're not really seeing that yet, but we might see the same flexibility in a kind of routinized way that we have seen in production. But it's going to be interesting to see what's happening. If you look at many organizations, and I've been a little bit amazed of some of the practical work I've been doing, is that artificial intelligence is popping up in health, it's popping up in retail, and with the products I'm working with, companies I'm working with in the smart home, artificial intelligence is here, there, and everywhere. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to develop over time. So Jay Gadwell actually said that also economies of scale and other stuff disappeared because of IT and 3D printing. But I think we're going to see a significant change in the way we organize, because we have to relate to artificial intelligence with respect to tasks that humans used to do. Is that scary? There's a lot of discussion about that, but if you go back, at least in Denmark, probably 100 years ago, 80% of the population was working in agriculture. Now it's 5%. And so jobs disappeared, but we found other things to do. And I think that's going to happen as well. And organizations have to find to create new jobs, and tasks will change, but jobs will still be there.
Well, Julia Flower has a nice comment about, will there be redesigned to incorporate AI and create meaningful jobs? We've just been talking about that, but I think one of the things I'd like to emphasize is that uh, the new jobs and is how do we work with AI, not so much the point of view is not to eliminate jobs, but is how individuals and AI are going to work together. And this is going to be, I think, and will be a major challenge for some time.
There's also that talking about language and so on. The interesting new technology is natural language processing, because what we also see is the human robot interface changes from being text to be face recognition, but now also that you can talk and get some answers back. So human robots are starting to be able to communicate using medias that we are using ourselves, and that is developing quite a bit. Let's see what else questions we have.
There's another comment, which we're very pleased that there's a PhD student, and the gist of his argument, as I understand it, is he doesn't see that AI as being the same as email or telephone lines. I think that's probably true. And the aspect of, I think he's concerned about AI being managers and telling employees what to do. Well, this may be a first step in that, but if you read Uber and how it's operated, that both the customer and the driver are completely managed in an operational sense by a system. There's no manager in that. All of the people in the, if you like, in the office are trying to make the system work, but they don't actually work the system. We talked about, is that a good step or a bad step? And he discusses here the limits for the greater good. These are issues that we're going to have to deal with. There's no doubt about that.
I can see one of my colleagues from Aarhus University is asking, what if we can't predict? Can we then still run the AI system we talked about? I think we have to emphasize, we are not suggesting that all organizations should run like in a new bureaucracy. But what we're trying to say is that we will see more than one trend, and that's sort of the title of this webinar, is that we will see organizations that will go towards more self-organizing, and we will see organizations that will start to have bureaucracy that we actually thought was going away. And we probably will see organizations that in part will do one and in other parts will do the other. And one of Rich Burton's former PhD students, Starling Hunter, actually did a PhD many years ago. And and what he found basically was that digitalization in IT systems would drive organizations to go more in the extreme. So we'll probably see organizations be more decentralized than we saw before, and we will see organizations be more centralized and rule-based than we saw before. And what we probably will see less of is organizations that are in the middle. And of course, AI cannot remove all the uncertainty. It can remove some. And if that's the case, then AI robots will come in. But I think we will. So what we're trying to say here is that there's no one solution that fits all. And many of these new organizational forms are definitely needed, but we will also see probably a revival of what we will call a new organizational or a new bureaucracy.
I think we may have skipped a question along the way, and if we did, we apologize for that. But I think we've covered a lot of the main themes that were brought up in the questions, and certainly the questions bring up very important issues and questions beyond what we covered in our talk. And so in that sense, we're very pleased because we think we did create some controversy, but more importantly, we created really good questions from all of the participants. As we look to the future, I think we've suggested some trends, as board just talked about, but I think in that there's also some opportunities, and particularly those of you in practice, I hope that what we talked about today will give you some inspiration that as you move along, that these issues are shared, they're very general, and they're part of the new world that we're moving into.
Yeah, also thank you for me for participating. And if you have any questions or comments aside from what we have talked about, we'll be happy to answer them. So send us an email. And this webinar and the PowerPoints will be available on the Organization Design Community website shortly. Thank you for participating.
Just to reemphasize, you'd like to chat with us, please send us an email. You can find our email by going to Google and looking up our names. Our emails are public information. Thank you again for your participation, and again for your very interesting comments and questions. Bye now.
Bye now.